Let me ask you something very direct. How often do you find yourself thinking about growth? Growing revenue, growing your team, growing your market presence. For most founders, this is a constant thought, and that is natural. But here is the deeper question. Are you having growth conversations before your business is actually ready for growth? Because in many MSMEs, the conversation about growth begins much earlier than it should, and that creates a silent problem. In today's business environment, growth is almost seen as the default expectation. If you are not growing, it feels like something is wrong. Investors talk about growth. Peers talk about growth. The market celebrates growth. So naturally, founders align their thinking in that direction. What should we do next? We should grow. But this answer often comes without a more important question being asked. Are we ready to grow? Now let me answer what founders actually mean by growth. When founders say they want growth, what they often mean is more revenue, more customers, more deals, more activity. And the immediate thinking becomes hire more people, increase outreach, enter new markets, push harder. But growth in this form is not always expansion. Sometimes it is just increased effort on an unstable base. Now let me bring in a reflection from my own journey. In my corporate experience of leading sales teams and driving significant revenue, I have seen phases where growth was aggressively pursued. Targets were increased, teams were expanded, expectations were raised. But in situations where the underlying sales system lacked clarity, something interesting happened. Growth efforts did not translate into stable outcomes. Instead, they created more coordination issues, more inconsistency, more pressure on teams. It was only when we stepped back and strengthened the foundation, clarity in pipeline, structured reviews, defined processes, that growth started becoming meaningful. This is something many founders realize only after going through unnecessary cycles of pressure. The core issue is not the desire for growth, the issue is the timing of that desire. If the foundation is weak, growth exposes those weaknesses faster. For example, if your sales process is unclear, more leads will create more confusion. If your team lacks alignment, more people will increase inconsistency. If your pipeline visibility is poor, more opportunities will increase unpredictability. Growth does not fix these problems. It magnifies them. Now the question is, why growth conversations come too early? There are three primary reasons, as I think. First, external influence. The ecosystem constantly pushes growth narratives. Second, internal pressure. Founders feel the need to show progress. Third, misunderstanding of sequence. Many believe that growth will automatically bring structure, but in reality, structure must precede growth. Now, here is the illusion of acceleration. Growth feels like acceleration. It feels like progress, it creates energy, but acceleration without direction leads to instability. You may move faster, but not necessarily in the right direction, and that is where founders begin to feel something is off. Despite more effort, outcomes do not feel proportionate. Despite expansion, control reduces. Despite growth, stress increases. Now the question is, what should come before growth? Before growth, there are three foundational elements that must be stabilized. First foundation is clarity of sales process. You should know how a deal moves from lead to closure. Second, consistency of execution. Your team should be able to follow a structured approach. Third, visibility of pipeline. You should understand where opportunities stand without confusion. If these three are not in place, growth will create more pressure than progress. Now, what is needed is a subtle shift in thinking. The shift required is simple but not easy. From how do we grow faster to how do we make our system clearer. This shift may not feel exciting, but it is powerful, because once clarity improves, growth becomes a natural outcome, not a forced effort. There is a principle worth reflecting on. Right action depends on right timing. Even the correct action, if done at the wrong time, creates disturbance. In business, growth is the right action, but only at the right stage. If pursued too early, it leads to imbalance. If pursued after stabilization, it leads to expansion. This distinction is subtle but critical. Now, there are three questions before you talk about growth. So, before initiating any growth conversation, a founder should pause and ask, do I have clarity on how my sales system works? Can my team operate consistently without constant correction? Do I have visibility into what is happening inside my pipeline? If the answer to this is not clear, the focus should not be growth, the focus should be foundation. Now, what happens when you fix foundations first? When foundations are fixed, something interesting happens. Growth becomes smoother, scaling becomes easier, pressure reduces. Because now the system can absorb expansion instead of reacting to it. Growth in this case is not forced, it is enabled. Growth is important, it is necessary, but it is not always the immediate next step. Sometimes the most powerful move a founder can make is to pause growth conversations and focus on strengthening the foundation. Because when the foundation is strong, growth does not need to be chased. It begins to emerge, and that is the difference between forced growth and sustainable growth. If this episode helped you rethink the timing of growth in your business, consider sharing it with another founder or leader who might be focusing on scaling without first stabilizing their systems. You can also follow the MSME Growth Hub podcast as we continue exploring how to build clarity before acceleration.